Hello, everyone. Nice to be here after a long time of not being here. And I'm gonna start light. I'm not gonna start by teaching anything really useful in Portuguese or in English. I am going to talk about something interesting that I did. And I went on to chat GPT, which is something that I oftentimes do. And now I just messed up with this. I always do that. And there it is. So I went to chat GPT and I asked it, what's the worst way to learn a language? Qual é a pior maneira de aprender idioma? And let's see what it gave to us. So, not surprisingly, the worst way to learn a language is one that is ineffective, uma maneira ineficaz, demotivating, and counterproductive. Here are some examples of what might be considered the worst ways to learn a language. So, I'm going to read them and then I'm going to maybe comment on them or on some of them because there are 10. No practice, not practicing the language at all or making no effort to use it regularly. Language learning requires consistent practice and exposure. So this is a very common mistake. It's somebody, for example, that goes on Duolingo or that has a list process or that has a system of any kind for learning, but a system in which practicing the language, and by practicing I mean using it for a purpose, a system in which that's not introduced or that's not part of the learning strategy. So 2, rote memorization, focusing solely on memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules without applying them in real life contexts. This can lead to a lack of practical language skills. Exactly. So again, that person that has a list of things, or that person that buys a grammar book and maybe knows the names of the grammar topics and knows the names of the verb tenses and knows the interaction between them. But if you don't actually go out in the world and use them in language, in communicating to people little by little, then those things are not going to sink in the language producing core. They're always going to be in your language blah, blah, blah realm, but not in the actual language usage. 3, isolation. Learning in complete isolation without interacting with native speakers or other learners. Language is a means of communication, and isolating yourself from real conversations can hinder your progress. Yes. What I usually say about this aspect is you're learning a language, and languages have evolved in human beings for the purpose of communication. So if you're not using language for what it actually came to be, which is communication with other human beings, other people of your own species, then something's not going to work. It's just not going to work because it's not meeting the actual purpose of this thing. So something is being faked, basically. Maybe you're imagining in your head that you're talking to someone, or and many students in their minds, they have perfect language skills. They even dream in the language maybe, but when it comes then to a real interaction, a real life interaction, then that knowledge may prove to not be there or to be much more difficult in real life just because you're not exercising those muscles. Boring and unengaging methods. Using materials and methods that are dull and uninteresting can quickly lead to loss of motivation. Language learning should be enjoyable and engaging. Yes. So this is what I often see with those schools that make their own book rather quickly sometimes. There's no research and variability within the material. And it's in those cases that I see the material as being very boring. And the student just loses. The student actually feels like they're not learning anymore, or they feel they blame themselves for this thing not working because everything is there and it was working before. So why is it not working now? Obviously, it's because I'm not making an effort. It's obviously because I'm not giving it my all. When in reality, I think it's about more profound brain wiring neurology things that this is not working, because something that was interesting at one point has become boring because it hasn't changed. There hasn't been variability. So bringing variability to any learning methodology is key, right? And this is something that when I'm teaching, I'm constantly worried about that. Is it variable enough? Am I changing activities enough? Because if lessons are always the same kind of thing, which is predictable, then it gets dull and boring. If you're my student watching this and our lessons have been dull and boring, let me know. We need to change activities. 5. Ignoring cultural context. Learning a language without any consideration for the culture and customs of the people who speak it can lead to misunderstandings and ineffective communication. I think I'm guilty of this. I oftentimes see language as just language, and I detach it often from culture. Not because I think culture is bad, not because I don't want to do it, because when it actually happens, when a student asks me cultural questions, then it's really actually nice and engaging, and it's a big part of me as well that goes into the lesson, or a big part of them if they share their culture. So, but yes, I think it's a flaw, and I think I need to fix this in the methodology, bringing more cultural aspects into the language. One way that I do try to counteract this, of course, is by asking them to transcribe videos of Brazilian people speaking, or videos in English if they're learning English. So, and that way they could bring certain cultural aspects to class. But yeah, I recognize it's a flaw at the moment. Overemphasis on grammar. Focusing excessively on grammar rules at the expense of communication and fluency can be counterproductive. While grammar is important, it should be balanced with speaking and listening practice. 100%. And I think this is something that we do quite well in my methodology, which is we don't talk about grammar. We don't freaking use grammar. I don't think in most cases, in 93.5% of cases, I don't think that students should be talking about grammar. I actually think it's counterproductive. I think that it's going to impact negatively their speaking right away, just because their brain is switching from a language production mode into a language analysis mode. And I think that at the time of speaking, this is not a good strategy. This is just not a good strategy. During conversation, I want my students to be very free to just produce functional language. I need them to be focused on making me understand what they want to say, even if not the correct grammar is being applied. Because I am the one working on that. I am getting their mistakes and I'm correcting them, and I'm sending them to my students as feedback for them to work on that after the lesson. So there's no point in them working on that during the lesson and, I guess, poisoning their speaking engine at the time of the lesson. Only using translation apps, relying solely on translation apps or dictionaries without attempting to think in the target language or understand its nuances can impede language acquisition. Awesome, yes. Another thing that I'm very ruthless, I guess, with my students, which is do not freaking use translation. Don't translate so much stuff. If you need to use translation, then it should be something, it should be a one-time thing. And I have translated this word, cool. I satiated my hunger for that, or my thirst. I needed it. I craved it. Sure, go and do it. And then try to come up with an example for that word that is gonna help you remember the meaning of it in the future, instead of going back to translating it again. You should never be translating the same word again twice. I don't think so. I think you should translate it maximum once if you actually feel the need. If you cannot get the meaning from examples and from other sources or from explanations in the target language, so monolingual dictionaries for that matter. There are ways to use translation more meaningfully, which is basically by attaching a cost to the translation. So you don't just go there and translate and that's it. Oh, nice, cool. No, you translated it and now you make an example with that word. You copy 2 or 3 synonyms to that word. You look up a meme with that uses that word, or you look up a joke that uses that word and maybe you write it down. So, there's going to be costs to doing the translation thing. The translation thing is not going unchecked. Not setting realistic goals. Setting unrealistic language learning goals can lead to frustration and disappointment. It's important to set achievable milestones and celebrate your progress along the way. I feel kind of guilty on this one too, because I never really set goals. What I do is talk to my students anytime that I believe that they are having unrealistic learning goals, or anytime that they are being unrealistically they're putting too much pressure on themselves in order to know certain things that are simply not it's not the time. They haven't reached a certain level that would enable them to understand something or to find something easy in the language. So I just help them see certain mistakes as natural, some other mistakes as not so natural, and therefore we could do something about. There are activities to be done in regards to that. And so yeah, at the same time, when students are complaining about their mistakes, and I need to raise awareness to how much they have been doing or how much they have not been doing, or some things that they're doing wrong as far as homework is concerned, for example. 9. Lack of motivation. Learning a language because you feel forced to, rather than because you have a genuine interest or need, can lead to lack of motivation and slow progress. Yes, this is a big one. And maybe that's why I focus so much on the student. I focus so much on my student and their lives and stuff. I would like their lives to be like translated into the language that they're learning so that it becomes interesting. But yeah, some students will come to me and they don't have a clear motivation, or maybe they thought it would be one way and it actually requires them to study, so they didn't think it would be that way. Or at least in my methodology, where you are required to do a lot and it's kind of frustrating many times. So when you don't have a clear motivation, it's hard, because in a traditional methodology with a book, let's get that, you're gonna have cumulative levels of things that you're achieving, so you kind of have some time to adapt, and you have some time to think, and maybe you may have some time to think about your motivations. Whereas in my methodology, right off the bat, you are faced with questions like motivation and how much you want this and how far are you willing to go. So yeah, it can be an impact. And number 10, inconsistent effort. Learning a language sporadically and without structured plan can result in slow progress and difficulty retaining what you've learned. Yeah, about inconsistency, I'm not the best person to require consistency from my students. I sometimes think they should be learning when they want to learn, but maybe this is not human, because we just don't want to learn. We just don't want to exercise. We don't want to go to the gym, right? So I'm beginning to think of it a little bit differently now. But my packages are built in terms of like, you need to do once weekly and follow through for 5 weeks, or do it twice weekly and follow through. So you need to finish the package. This is both for me to have a more consistent income or predictability, but also, and I'd say mostly, because my students need to have some kind of consistency. About the structured plan, yeah, I don't have a structured plan. Sometimes I even say that I offer language training more than, I don't know, a language class or something. We're going to be dealing, and you will be learning the language anyway. But yeah, this is something that I've been also thinking about, which is, a little bit of structure wouldn't hurt. I can do my random thing even within structure. So yeah, I've been thinking about that. I agree with this thing now. Because oftentimes I got confused about what is a material and what is structure, and structure and materials are two completely different things. It doesn't need to be a textbook, but it can have some kind of structure, some kind of mental structure or mental milestones, or not necessarily related to vocabulary or levels or that kind of stuff, right? In summary, the worst way to learn a language is any method that hinders your progress, demotivates you, or fails to provide practical communication skills. Effective language learning involves a combination of regular practice, engaging methods, cultural awareness, and clear sense of purpose and motivation. Well, that's it. It's been a long video, I guess. Hope to see you here soon. Bye-bye. I found where to stop this now.